a world where the rules are unforgiving, one woman faces a countdown to her death bound by a law that offers no mercy. She has 72 hours to find a new bond or be erased from existence, alone, rejected and forgotten by all, until a stranger steps forward with a single word that could change everything. This is a story of defiance, compassion, and the power of one human's promise to save a life. Will a simple act of kindness be enough to rewrite the laws of an entire world? Time is running out. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The twin moons hung low over the alien city of Solara, casting a soft silver glow across the stone plaza. The sky above was painted in streaks of faded red, like the final breath of a dying flame. A quiet wind moved through the empty streets, tugging at cloaks and brushing dust across the ground. In the center of the plaza, one figure stood alone. Her name was Lyra. She wore a long robe the color of moonlight, and over her heart was stitched a dark symbol of mourning. Around her neck rested a thin glowing ring, iron in appearance but warm with an eerie red light. It pulsed softly, one slow beat at a time. It was a mark of loss, a mark of time, and a mark of doom. Lyra didn't cry. She stood still, her eyes downcast but her shoulders straight. The people of Solara watched from the shadows, their faces blank, their mouths shut. No one came near her. No one spoke. No one dared. High above them, from the viewing balcony of the city's old hall, a voice rang out flat and final. You have 72 hours to bond. If you fail, your name and memory will be erased. Let the count begin. Nail stood near the edge of the crowd, his hands clenched behind his back. He was human, a visiting envoy sent to this strange planet to discuss trade and alliances. He had seen much in his years. Ruins of ancient worlds, victories carved in history, and betrayals whispered in dark corridors, but nothing had prepared him for this. He leaned toward the elder guiding him, a thin man with folded skin the color of fog. What is happening? Nael whispered. The elder didn't blink. She is a widow. By our laws, her purpose is now void, unless she bonds again. She has 72 hours to be chosen, or her time in this world ends. Nael turned his gaze back to Lyra. You mean they'll execute her? No, the elder said softly. She will simply cease, her life withdrawn, her memory deleted. We consider it mercy. Nael didn't reply. There was nothing merciful about the scene before him. Lyra stood alone in the glow of the moons, surrounded by silence. Her hands were still. Her head was bowed. But even in her stillness, Nael saw something strange, an inner strength that shone brighter than her robe. She didn't weep. She didn't beg. She simply endured. The crowd began to drift away, like fog breaking apart under the morning sun. They didn't walk fast. They didn't speak. They just faded, leaving her in the middle of the great plaza, like a forgotten statue. Lyra didn't move, not until the plaza was almost empty. Then, slowly, she turned and walked toward the fountain that marked the heart of Solara. Its waters shimmered in the moonlight, quiet and cold. She knelt beside it and dipped her hands into the basin, lifting the water to her lips. Nael saw her hands tremble. Two guards stood nearby, faces hidden behind dark masks. They didn't stop her. They didn't speak. They were only there to watch, to wait, to count the hours. Nael's chest tightened. He wanted to walk forward, to ask what he could do, but he was a guest here, a diplomat. Interfering in a custom this deep could bring ruin, not only to him, but to everything his mission stood for. Still, his legs wouldn't carry him away. He watched her try once, just once, to speak to a passing male. The man, taller than her by half a head, looked at her with something colder than anger. He shoved her back without a word. She stumbled but didn't fall. She straightened again and continued walking. Nael swallowed hard. He'd witnessed cruelty in many forms. Wars started over less. But this silent punishment, This quiet forgetting was deeper than cruelty. It was erasure by silence, and it hurt to watch. As the night deepened, Lyra found her way back to the fountain. She sat at its edge and pulled her robe tight around her. Her head leaned against the stone. Her lips moved faintly. Nael didn't know the words, but he understood their weight. A goodbye. A slow, quiet farewell. He wanted to turn away, wanted to tell himself there was nothing he could do, that this was their law, their way. But something held him still. He had seen countless rituals on dozens of worlds, each strange in its own way, but never one that demanded the heart die with the body, never one that punished someone for grieving. When the stars appeared overhead one by one, Lyra remained silent and still. Her body curled against the stone. Her breath was slow and steady, but the iron ring around her neck continued to pulse. Red, then dim, then red again. Nael stayed until he was the last figure in the plaza, until the night claimed even the smallest light. He didn't know what he could do, but he knew, with growing certainty, that he had to do something, even if it meant breaking the rules. The morning sun rose slowly over Solara, casting long golden beams across the silent city. The warmth didn't reach the stone plaza, where the air still felt cold and heavy. Lyra sat by the fountain, her back straight despite the tired weight in her body. Her silver robe, now stained with dust, clung to her shoulders. The iron band around her neck pulsed steadily, its red glow deepening with each hour. 24 hours had passed. She had 48 left. Nael stood at the edge of the plaza again. He had returned as soon as light touched the city. Officially, he was here for more talks, trade routes, border agreements, promises of peace. But none of that mattered right now. Not when he could see Lyra sitting there, untouched, ignored and slowly being forgotten. The city moved around her like she wasn't even there. People stepped around her, careful not to make eye contact, as though a glance could break something fragile in the air. Lyra stood slowly and approached another male, this one in ceremonial armor, his broad frame casting a long shadow across the stones. She bowed her head and said something Nael couldn't hear. The man didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. He walked past, silent and uncaring, as though she were no more than wind. She didn't flinch, but Nael saw her hands tighten at her sides. He wanted to run forward, to demand the man stop, to shout, "See her! She's still here!" But he didn't. Not yet. Later that day, Nael met with his fellow diplomats. They noticed his distracted stare, his short answers. One of them, a woman named Dellen, pulled him aside. "You're spending too much time in that plaza," she said, folding her arms. "You know we're not supposed to interfere with their customs." Nael nodded. "I know. You could lose your position. This whole agreement could fall apart." "I know," he said again, but his voice was quieter this time. "It just doesn't feel right." Dellen sighed. "It's not about feelings. It's about respect. We don't have to like their laws. We just have to stay out of them." He didn't reply. Part of him agreed, but a larger part, the part that kept waking him up at night seeing Lyra's face in his mind, couldn't let it go. That evening, Nael returned once more. Lyra was still there, walking slowly now, her steps uncertain. She approached another stranger, then another. Each one turned away. Some didn't even stop walking. One laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed too loud in the quiet air. Nael's fists tightened at his sides. This wasn't tradition. It was cruelty in slow motion. A child stepped out from a nearby alley. Nael noticed him before anyone else did. He was small, with dark eyes and a curious look on his face. He walked up to Lyra, holding something in his hands. A flower, simple, yellow, picked from some corner of the city that still grew things. The boy held it out to her without a word. Lyra looked down at him, confused at first. Then slowly she knelt and took the flower. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes changed. The silence between them was softer than the silence before. She touched the boy's head gently and he ran off. His job complete. Neil felt something stir in his chest. Maybe not all had forgotten her. He stayed until night fell again. This time he brought a blanket. He left it near the fountain without a word and watched from the shadows as Lyra found it. She held it in her hands for a long time, then wrapped it around herself and lay down beside the fountain, just as she had the night before. The iron band pulsed steadily. Neil knew he couldn't watch this again. He couldn't stand by while the countdown continued and she disappeared inch by inch, but he still didn't know how to help. The next morning he sought out another translator. The last one had been too old, too distant. This one was younger, with bright eyes and a tattooed face. Neil asked carefully, "Is there really no other way for her?" The translator didn't hesitate. "No, the law is old and unbreakable. A widow who is not chosen must be released." "Released?" Neil asked. "That's what you call it?" "It is better than letting her wander without purpose, without a place. Death brings peace." Neil's stomach turned. Why not let her live somewhere else? Quietly, peacefully. "Because in our world, life without connection is suffering," the translator said simply. "It would be a slower kind of death." Neil didn't agree, but he didn't argue. What good would arguing do now? That evening, as the sky turned red again and the air grew still, Neil returned one more time. Lyra was walking again, slower than before. Her robe dragged slightly behind her. She tried to speak to another man, her voice soft, her hands respectful. He looked at her briefly, then shook his head and walked away. Neil watched her stand still in the center of the plaza. The crowd passed by like she was made of air. Her eyes closed, just for a moment. Her breath shook in her chest. He knew he was out of time. Something had to change. And if no one else would move, then maybe it had to be him. The sky over Solara was pale and silent as the second morning arrived. Lyra remained by the fountain, her robe more dust than silver now, her movements slower, heavier. The iron band on her neck glowed with a steady red pulse, brighter than before. 2 days had passed and she had not been chosen. Time no longer felt like an idea. It was a weight pressing on her chest, ticking louder with every breath. The plaza still bustled with life around her, but no one saw her. Or if they did, they chose to pretend she was not there. Neil returned, though he told no one. He no longer came for diplomacy. He came because of something he couldn't explain, something that had begun deep inside and refused to let go. The rules didn't matter to him anymore. Every hour he spent in Solara's grand halls discussing agreements and trade felt like a lie. What good were promises between worlds if mercy didn't exist in either? He watched from a distance as Lyra stood and approached another figure, a strong-looking man with golden markings on his skin. She bowed slightly, keeping her voice low and respectful. The man didn't answer. He looked away, his jaw tight, and walked on as though she'd never spoken. Lyra blinked several times, then turned to another and another. Always the same. Some ignored her. Some gave a brief, cruel smirk. Others hissed under their breath or shook their heads without even pausing. Neil's heart ached watching her. It was more than rejection. It was erasure. Lyra wasn't being pushed aside. She was being carved out of their world one refusal at a time. Yet she did not fall. She did not scream. She simply kept moving, her chin lifted slightly higher each time, though her body betrayed the toll it was taking. He left the plaza that afternoon and walked to a quieter part of the city. He needed answers, real ones, not from books or stiff officials. There he found a young translator named Thalin, sitting beneath a large stone tree with glowing leaves. Niall sat beside him and asked, "Is there really no other path?" "No choice. For her but to die?" Thalin hesitated. "There is no formal path, no. The law is clear. A widow who remains unbonded is released from life." "Released," Niall repeated, bitterness in his voice. "How can you believe that's mercy?" Thalen looked up. Because in our world, a person's value is measured by connection. To be alone is to be broken. Nael stared into the distance. Then maybe your world is broken. Maybe she's not the one without value. Thalen didn't answer, and Nael didn't wait. As dusk began to fall, the plaza grew quiet again. Lyra had stopped walking. Her legs barely carried her, and her face was pale under the moonlight. She sat on the fountain's edge, her hands wrapped tightly in her robe. Her lips moved silently again, perhaps singing, perhaps praying. Nael stepped forward, crossing the space between them with careful steps. The guards noticed. Their eyes followed him. Their hands rested on the hilts of their weapons, but they did not stop him. He didn't speak when he reached her. He simply sat nearby and placed a small object between them, a folded cloth wrapped around something delicate. Lyra looked at it, but did not touch it. After a long moment, she finally asked, "Why are you here?" Nael's voice was soft. "Because you shouldn't be alone." She didn't respond right away. Then quietly she said, "This is not your world. You owe me nothing." "I know," he said, "but I made a promise." "To who?" "To myself," he replied, "that I would not let silence be your ending." She looked at him, really looked, her tired eyes filled with something deep and heavy. "You cannot stop what must happen." "I can't change the law," he admitted, "but I can stay. I can see you. I can remember you. Maybe that's something." Lyra lowered her gaze. Then slowly, she reached for the wrapped cloth and opened it. Inside was a single hand-carved figure, a woman standing tall, carved from soft white stone. It wasn't perfect. The lines were rough. The details were small. But it was clearly her. Lyra stared at it, then at him. "I don't want to be forgotten," she said, barely more than a whisper. "You won't be," Nael said. For the first time in days, Lyra smiled, faint but real. It didn't change her fate. The countdown hadn't stopped. The iron ring still pulsed. But something in the plaza shifted. Not for the guards, not for the laws, but for two souls who chose not to look away. Later that night, as stars filled the sky again, Nael stayed by her side. He said nothing more, but she knew. And for the first time, the silence between stars didn't feel empty. It felt like a promise. One born not from duty or law, but from understanding, from the choice to care. And even though the fire burned low and the hours grew short, that promise remained, glowing quietly beneath the ashes. The final hours had arrived, the sun sinking low and casting a deep red light across the plaza. Lyra sat on the cold stone ground, her back against the fountain, the soft hum of the iron band around her neck growing louder. The glow had turned almost entirely red, a warning that could be seen by everyone. It was clear now, she was marked for extinction. In less than an hour, the countdown would end, and with it, her life would be erased. The plaza was nearly empty, the usual crowd having long since gone home, leaving her alone in the quiet night as it had been for days. Nael stood on the edge of the square, watching her from a distance. He had spent the past 2 days thinking, walking, debating. He had spoken with everyone who would listen, but the laws of Solara were ancient, their customs set in stone. There was no escaping the rules. Lyra had failed to bond. She had no place in their world. There was no mercy for the unbonded. He had tried everything he could think of, and still nothing had worked. No one else had stepped forward to offer her a hand. No one had shown any kind of compassion. The system was too rigid, too ingrained. She was too broken for them to care. But Nael wasn't willing to accept that. He had come to Solara as a diplomat, to negotiate trade routes, to build alliances between worlds. But in the days he had spent observing Lyra, something had changed inside him. She wasn't just a symbol of a broken system. She wasn't a victim to be pitied. She was a person who had lost everything and yet still held on to something that none of them seemed to understand. A quiet strength, a refusal to surrender. to the weight of a world that had forgotten her. He couldn't let her die like this. As the clock ticked down, Nail made his decision. He crossed the plaza toward her, moving slowly but with determination. The guards watched him with narrowed eyes, but they didn't stop him. He wasn't breaking any laws. Not yet. But the moment he stepped forward, he knew he was about to. Lyra looked up at him as he approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Her eyes were tired, filled with resignation. But there was something else there, too. A flicker of something, hope, perhaps, or maybe just a small, fragile wish that someone would notice her before the end. Nail stopped a few steps away, his heart beating louder than the hum of the iron band around her neck. "I don't know what to say," Nail said quietly, his voice steady but raw. "I don't have any words that can change this. I don't know how to undo what's been done." Lyra didn't respond. She just stared at him as if she were waiting for him to give up, for him to say what everyone else had been saying, that this was how it had to be, that there was no hope left. But Nael wasn't ready to let her go. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, something simple, a small silver flask worn from travel but still shining in the moonlight. He walked over to her and held it out. The gesture wasn't grand or heroic, it was a simple act of kindness. A drink, a moment of connection, the smallest offer of something human in a world that had grown cold and indifferent. Lyra looked at the flask, then at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She didn't take it at first, as if she weren't sure if she had the right to accept such an offering. But then slowly, she reached out. Her fingers brushed against his hand, light as a whisper, and she took the flask from him. The touch was fleeting, but in it, Nail felt something shift. She drank carefully, almost reverently, as if the simple act of drinking from the flask meant something more than just quenching her thirst. When she finished, she handed it back to him without a word. Nail didn't speak either. There was nothing more to say, not in that moment. He simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that passed between them. He saw her eyes soften, just a little, and for the first time in days, the iron band around her neck seemed to lose its harsh, oppressive glow. But the plaza was still silent. The guards stood nearby, their eyes on Nail, waiting for the moment to come. They were ready to do what they had been trained to do, what the law required them to do. The time was nearly up. Nail felt his pulse quicken. He didn't know what he was doing, didn't know how it would end, but something inside him had broken. Something told him that this wasn't just about Lyra. It wasn't just about one woman's fate. It was about something bigger. It was about standing up against the cold indifference of a world that had forgotten how to care. About finding one small piece of light in a place so consumed by darkness. "I'm not leaving you," Nail said, his voice strong and sure. "Not like this." Lyra didn't answer, but she stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. She didn't fall. She didn't give in. She stood, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel like a shadow. She was a person again. The iron band around her neck flickered, then dimmed, its red glow fading. The guards looked at each other, uncertain, as if they weren't sure what to do. Nail stood his ground, his eyes locked on Lyra's. And then, in the quiet of the plaza, a word slipped from his lips, a single word, simple yet profound. The word that would change everything. Belong. It wasn't a command. It wasn't an offer. It was a promise. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, she nodded. In that moment, the world shifted. The plaza was still. The law had not been broken, not in the way anyone expected. But in that quiet space, something new had begun, something small but powerful. A new word, a new world, born from a single act of kindness, from a refusal to let a person fade into nothing. The countdown had ended, but for the first time in days, Lyra didn't feel erased. She felt seen, and for Nail, that was enough.